Hey everyone, football show's coming at you. Aston Villa top of the Champions League. Let's just get that out front and early. Jonathan Wilson is going to join us to talk all things Champions League, all things football. Jonathan, just about as good as any football journalist over in the UK covering the game, so it's great to have him on. Conan, hello.
Hello, Joe.
Ronan Mullen at present is outside. He's upset. Ruth Fahy due to come on to talk to us about Republic of Ireland against Georgia on Friday night, the first of two-legged affair. Home leg is on Tuesday at Tallaght Stadium. They're in Tbilisi on Friday. Unfortunately, Ruth, who's over working with Colorado Rapids, of course, has had to pull out last minute work. Pesky Colorado Rapids have intervened. So she sends big apologies and she promises to come on early next week to talk about the Georgia leg one into leg two.
I sort of think I was catching a few strays there because he looked at the running order, he saw Aston Villa, he looked at you and said, no, we should keep this show as short as possible.
We are going to keep this relatively brief, if that's okay, because Jonathan is waiting to go. But Aston Villa are indeed top of Champions League table. Now, 4 teams, including Liverpool, can catch them this evening. But at a minimum, Conan, you will have at least a week of joint top, worst case scenario, joint top of Europe after 3 games in. How does it feel?
I had a full day of it, so I've got all the screenshots I need. 3 games down. Like, that's a good chunk of games now as well. That's not just a one game wonder.
It's 3 games.
Head of Liverpool, head of Brest, who can also catch us.
John Duran likes coming on as substitute, does not like going off as substitute, is a fair summation. So he started the game, obviously had been super sub and scored against Munich and deservedly started the game, and then just after scoring came off and gave one of the great punching and kicking of chair in front of him displays I'd seen in some time, to the point where whoever was sitting in front of him and was having that, you know, we've all had it in an airplane, oh God, who's that behind my chair? He didn't even turn around. He was like, I can tell John Duran's losing it. I'm just going to laugh as my chair repeatedly, violently gets kicked forward.
There's 2 of them as Bogard and Nejalovic, 2 defenders, 2 young defenders who were just sitting in front of him.
I'll just take it.
You seem to be taking off tape and chucking it at the back of their heads
why,
as well.
Why was John Duran so annoyed, do you think?
He just seems to be this type of character. I mean, it was interesting to me that they were asking Yuri Tielemans about it afterwards. You know, and every time they all talk about him, they always say, he's a bit mad. And that was one of the first things he said as well. Great player. You have to keep on him. His attention can go sometimes. Then they just started showing him this clip of him coming off. And like you say, just causing chaos on the side. And Tielemans actually just burst out laughing as he was watching, because just before they showed him the clip, he said, I think he's quite funny sometimes. And then they showed this, and he burst out laughing so much so that they had to end up like sort of encouraging him to talk again. And they said, it's interesting that the manager didn't react. And Tielemans said, the manager doesn't care. You know, it's like they've seen it all before. They're willing to indulge him now because he's so good. Like actually on that clip as well, McGinn, who's just brought off, is sitting beside him on the bench laughing as well. Yeah. It's almost like they're just like, there goes John now.
There's a degree of it's just Eric.
And he's just signed a new contract last week. So we know he's not going to leave anytime soon now. Like he's signed up for 5 years. They
beat Bologna. I was watching the game in Madrid, which I'll talk to Jonathan about in just a moment, but by all accounts, they were a very comfortable winner. This was just a comfortable Champions League night at the office for Villa. Is that about right?
Oh, yeah. And like they played really well. They haven't always been that good this year, but they're always potent, Aston Villa. They can always score, which is really a joy to watch. You know, you sit down every game, no matter how they play, you know they're going to create chances because of the way they play and the profile of player. And what's amazing now is they got some people back from injury and they're starting to rotate the squad. That's why John Duran is suddenly starting, which isn't, you know, it's hardly a downgrade that much. You know, John McGinn starting, who hasn't been starting. Yeah. Kamara is back. Mings was warming up last night. It's, you know, I know injuries can happen again, but right now at this moment, you're like, geez, that is a team that could actually compete.
They have a great chance of being top 8, which means they'll go through to the last 16. And I guess to echo what a lot of people are saying, on their day, I mean, they're not going to win a Premier League. They don't have that depth. They're not that good. But on their day, can they beat pretty much anyone? Yeah, you know, like it could be a kind of a special year, maybe.
Can they win the Champions League? Is that what you're asking me?
I think I'm setting you up so that it's all the more crushing when they don't.
Yeah, we'll have all the sound bites.
I'm going to keep at you, though. You know, Colin, I think they could, though. I think they could. Tomorrow's a special day. 2-year anniversary of Unai Emery.
Oh, my God.
Arriving in Aston Villa when they were fighting for relegation.
Yeah.
How is he not just the manager of Europe at all times at the moment?
Yeah.
Who got manager of the season last year? Did he get it?
No.
Pep.
He didn't get it. I think it was Pep.
Was it? It's hard not to give it to Pep. But I mean, come on. This is phenomenal.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's well documented that obviously Gerrard had them in the relegation battle.
Prince William wasn't there.
Prince William wasn't there, but he was quick to tweet
Saw
to
that.
say that he
I
was
did
watching.
see that.
Yeah, so
I'm watching.
that's our William watch.
Yeah, he tweeted Ali McCoy.
He did, yeah. TNT coverage is pretty good, actually. They have so much variety to it.
Is it good?
It's just they give you so much. See, I'm catching up on a lot of it then as well afterwards and on the socials, and they have Ali up in the gantry, and they have, I know it's Rio, you have to swallow that a little bit down at pitchside, but then the interviews, and they just seem to have so many people on site that you get so many different angles.
They're
of
making
it.
an effort.
And they have the obviously goal show going on at the same time, so then they're getting sound bites from that as well.
Yeah. Okay, well, listen, top of the Champions League, that's Aston Villa. We are going to hear from Jonathan Wilson. Jonathan Wilson is back with us. Jonathan, hello.
Hi, how you doing?
You started off with Arsenal, you switched to Madrid, Dortmund, you ended up with the goals show. It's another Champions League evening in your world.
Yeah, it was a difficult one to know what to watch last night. And I guess maybe that suggests something good about the present format, although I'm sort of loath to claim that. But I thought, having seen Arsenal and the sort of implosion at Bournemouth on Saturday, I thought it was not impossible they might struggle against Shakhtar. And I don't think they played particularly well, but they did enough. And Shakhtar didn't. I mean, Shakhtar aren't having a great season themselves. And by the time they took the lead, I think Arsenal were comfortable enough. Albeit, I think they needed to take the lead then. I think they were starting to get slightly anxious. And by that point, Dortmund had started to put a bit of pressure on Madrid, so I switched over to that. And then once Madrid went 3-2 up, I thought, no, I'll just watch the goal show, because I saw that Juve were on the brink of dropping points out to Stuttgart.
Why are you loath to lavish praise on our new Swiss format?
Because it's awful. And this was the sort of realization I had at the end of the night, that Real Madrid game was a really exciting game. There was some really good football in that, some really good goals. It was classic Real Madrid, classic Dortmund. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't really affect the chance of either side of going through. And I think that is the problem with this format. Even Juve Stuttgart. Juve losing at home to Stuttgart, well, they'll still go through. It really doesn't matter. And there was a moment when Dortmund are 2-0 up, and you might have had a situation in Madrid on 3 points from 3 games, and then you'd be thinking, God, this will be funny if they went out. If this new format that was put together to help make things even better for the big clubs, if they did end up going out, that would be hilarious. But of course, it's Real Madrid and it's Dortmund, the most comebacky team in the world against the most give away a leady team in the world. I mean, I don't know how Dortmund didn't get the copyright on Spursiness, because they are more Spursy than Spurs. I don't know. I just sort of felt the end of the night. So I just felt a bit cheated that I'd allowed myself to get sucked into sort of thinking this mattered.
Empty.
And actually, so what if Madrid had?
But was this not the case with the group stages? Really?
I mean, to an extent, but at least there was some jeopardy there.
Okay.
And I accept in a lot of groups, and we saw this with Madrid repeatedly, or it feels like we saw this with Madrid repeatedly, that they might take 1 point from the first 2 games or something, and then they'd win the next 3 and they'd be through. And it wasn't particularly exciting. But occasionally you got a group like, for instance, the group you had last season when you had Newcastle and PSG and Milan and Dortmund. And okay, that's a freak of a draw, and that was sort of the coefficients going wrong, if you like. But that group was really interesting. And what I think that the real sadness of this is those of us who are old enough to remember when the Champions League first came in, and the group stages you used to get, when it felt like every game really mattered, when every game was tough. And it's a different world. I mean, partly because there weren't as many groups, I guess, so the quality was more concentrated.
Yeah.
But partly because a team like Nantes could be a real European danger, or Spartak Moscow could be a real European danger. And you go away to Panathinaikos, and it was a really difficult game. The group in 1989, when you had Burnby there, but when you had Manchester United and Bayern and Barca, and they were really high quality and every game mattered. And now it feels like we've replaced that with just a series of content rather than actual matches. And yeah, like it absolutely wasn't perfect in the group stage before, but at least there were some matches that mattered.
Okay, fair point. The game at the Bernabeu, nonetheless, was good content. And
very good content, yeah.
Madrid are just so odd. It's really, I think they're taking it to either greater depths or newer heights. I'm not sure which is the apt phrasing. So this was, in many respects, for the first half, for anyone who didn't see the game, a total repeat of the Champions League final, in that Real Madrid's left-hand side is fundamentally off balance because, to almost a hilarious extent, Vinicius Jr. will do no work off the ball. And so what happened last May was that Kroos, if you remember, had to truck out to try and shut down Ryerson and Sancho and Sabitzer. It was a 3v2 with Vinicius and Mendy, and he just didn't have the legs to do it. And so last night it's 37-year-old Luka Modric who has been forced to truck out to the left-hand side repeatedly. And again, Dortmund, I mean, they're a brilliant team in so many ways. They're so quick-footed and energetic and tactically astute. And they said, okay, if you're giving us this option again, we're going to take it. And you saw that come to full fruition for the second goal. And then something really odd happened in that at 2-0, Dortmund declared and said, okay, let's take off our pace and go to a back five and invite Real Madrid onto us. And actually, Emre Can, you should go to right wing back and Vinicius is going to be your guy. And look, Madrid, for all their failings, that's a game they can play. And away they went and they played it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely what happened. That, I mean, maybe you do that with 10 minutes ago or 15 minutes ago. Maybe if you think, we're starting to get a bit tired here, we need to just bed in. Or maybe you think you just need to present a different tactical challenge to Real Madrid. But that substitution you're talking about, Gittins going off for Valdemar Anton, was 10 minutes after half time?
Yeah.
And then Malen went off with Pascal Gross about 10 minutes after that. And then Chan came on, I think it was about 10 minutes after that. And the thing that Real Madrid, I mean, this is too simplistic, but it's also true. The thing Real Madrid are really good at is attacking. And the thing they're really bad at is defending. So how about you make them defend rather than just sort of going, you know what, we're not going to attack you, so you don't have to bother defending. You just do the thing you're good at. And you look at that midfield, the Real Madrid midfield, and so they got the three forwards, Vinicius, who does no work, Kylian Mbappe does no defensive work. Kylian Mbappe does no defensive work. Rodrigo does some defensive work. You got Jude Bellingham in midfield, who doesn't do a huge amount of defensive work. And then you've got Modric, who's 37, and you got Fede Valverde. There's not a lot of legs in that side, and so you can get at them. And if you say to them, "I'll tell you what, just play an hour half, and then you don't have to do any running," why would you do that? It just was baffling to me. So yeah, I think for Nuri Sahin that was a very, very strange move. Maybe just the excitement of being 2-0 up in the Bernabeu. Maybe that scrambles heads, but I think the circumstances in which you minimise your own attacking threat, particularly when you've already scored 2 goals in the game, maybe when you're down to 10 men away at Manchester City, as Arsenal did, when was it, 3 weeks ago, that nearly worked. Maybe that is a justifiable occasion to do it. But I thought it was a really weird decision to just take away that pace that's been causing Madrid such problems. Just say to them, come on, just attack us.
Vinicius is an interesting case study, isn't he? Like Ancelotti said, he's an extraordinary character. He will win the Ballon d'Or based off of these performances. And anybody who watched the highlights last night will think, my God, Vinicius was sensational. But like in so many ways, he was the root cause of their problems in that first half. I take the point on Bellingham. I think he does enough work. And his tackle actually set up Vinicius to run a Chan for one of the goals. There's a moment in around 50 minutes where Bellingham, in a kind of Bruno Fernandes way, has decided, I'm going to press like crazy now. And there's a comical moment where he's pressed someone who only has one option, and it's Dortmund right back on the touchline, and Vinicius is 10 metres away. and Bellingham is pressing man in possession who's going to have to give it to this right back. And Vinicius is still just watching it all unfold in slightly disinterested way. And Bellingham sort of turns to him and say, will you come on? If you just take 10 meters, if you just walk 10 meters, we really do have them here. And I don't know, how can a player like that win the Ballon d'Or when he's just so bad out of possession? How can we discount somebody out of possession like that?
I mean, I would agree with you, but I mean, I think individual awards in football are largely meaningless and stupid anyway. Who's been the most effective player in the world in the last year? It's been Rodri. It's obviously it's been Rodri.
Yeah.
But Rodri is not somebody who gets teenagers excited. You know, he's not somebody who scores brilliant goals. Well, he scores the odd brilliant goal, but he doesn't pick up the ball and run 40 yards at great pace and lash it in as Vinicius can do. I mean, Vinicius, I think, is an incredible finisher.
Yeah.
I think it'd be really interesting to know how he would have developed had he not been at Real Madrid. Had he been in a team that doesn't just dominate all the time. If he'd been at a team where you were expected to do some work, would he have been a different type of player, or was that always inbuilt with him? And I think the same with Mbappe. I think Mbappe really sort of, I don't want to say he's destroyed himself as a footballer because he's still clearly a great footballer, but he's not the player he might have been if he'd gone to a proper club rather than to PSG and hung around there for ages. And going to Real Madrid's not really going to make him any better. And the thing that frustrates me with Mbappe is there's such a great player there, and we've got about, I don't know, 80-85% of that, which is still a great player, but he could have been a really great player. And it's a bit similar to what you're saying about Vinicius last night. That you look at the World Cup final, and Mbappe scored a hat trick. Well, two of them were penalties, and if he'd actually done anything in the first 70 minutes of the game, maybe they wouldn't have been 2-0 down, needing him to score a hat trick even to take the penalties. So, it's an ongoing issue with incredibly talented individuals that they add a lot in terms of the goals they can score, in terms of the players they can beat. But there is a negative side of that as well in terms of the overall structure. Real Madrid, for the past sort of 10, 15 years, seem to get away with that. You look at just how open they were, though, and you do wonder whether when we get to the quarterfinals and beyond, whether other teams will capitulate in the way that Dortmund did. But then I feel like I've been saying this every week watching Real Madrid for the last decade, and they always do get away with it.
I know. I was going to tweet about Vinicius at halftime, and then I thought I wouldn't do that. There's no natural justice with this group.
Yeah. No, there isn't. It sort of it makes you believe that the deity football is a very capricious god with real favourites. It doesn't. Yeah, absolutely no natural justice whatsoever.
Manchester United play Fenerbahce tomorrow, and so in United and in Jose, I suppose the years have not been kind of late. We have two reduced entities. It's a Europa League clash. Manchester United are in the bottom half of the table. And Jose, I guess, has kind of run out of elite clubs willing to engage in his services. That is not to diminish a Europa League final with Roma, but Fenerbahce currently 8 points off Galatasaray, and Fenerbahce legend goalkeeper Volkan Demirel, Turkish goalkeeper, now pundit, is saying some familiar things about Mourinho and Fenerbahce. He reckons Fenerbahce at present currently, quote, mixed with unhappiness and hopelessness. So that's arrived about 3 years early, I would say. Both, I suppose, diminished. Jose, 61 years of age. I mean, Ancelotti, 65, and still, whatever sprinkling of magic he had 20 years ago, it's still effective. Whereas with Jose, he just feels so out of kilter with where the elite teams are in their coaching. Yeah,
I think that's true. I mean, I was just trying to think: is it true that the more negative the manager, the less long their career? I sort of sense it should be true, but I kind of can't think of enough examples to prove that maybe there's something about being paranoid and twisted and introverted that means the thing sort of goes toxic very quickly.
Do you mean negative as a personality or his more defensive slant?
Well, I think the two often go together, don't they? I think it's. Yeah, you look at. I think the great example of this, in a much shorter time frame, is the Inter of Helenio Herrera, who when they get to the European Cup final in '67, they've just started to. They collapse in the league that season and lose the league title. And that what was just begun when that final happens. So I think they still have, I don't know, 5-6 games to go in the league, and they're in this sort of. I think it's a hotel in Estoril. They've been sequestered from the rest of the world. They're all just together. They're going through the kind of, this is how you stop Tommy Gemmell playing. This is how you stop Bobby Lennox playing or whatever. And there's this sort of sense of negativity building up and the fear and the paranoia. And I remember speaking to Takisio Bergnic, the sort of right back come right-sided centre-back man marker, and him saying, I couldn't sleep the night before the game because all I could hear was our captain next door vomiting with terror. And you think, these things eventually they just build up to an unsustainable level. And I think on a more on a much broader canvas, on a more diluted version of that, I think that is what tends to happen to those managers who live on the paranoia and live on the negativity, whose whole game is about stopping the opposition rather than playing yourself. And I think Mourinho took that turn quite self-consciously after failing to get the Barcelona job in 2008. 2008. That I think his Porto was not that negative. And then he decided, right, we're going to play without the ball. I'm going to be, it is, he made a very self-conscious turn to the dark side. I seem to feel that last time I was on, we started talking about Star Wars for no reason, and I'm doing it again. But all managers have an Anakin Skywalker turn in them.
Yeah. Because it's funny, so when I picture his Champions League winning Inter side a couple of years after that 08 turn to the dark side, I see them out of possession and I see hardworking winger Samuel Eto'o, and they're in a 4-4-2 out of possession. And that is now very much in vogue. That is like a shape we are seeing in modern day football. So I kind of think, God, he should still be able to coach that very, very well. And yet I somehow don't even think that's applicable to his teams. They're not like, it's a shutout again, we're going to 1-0 our way to the elite of the European game anymore. For some reason, even that sort of deserted him.
Yeah, I think the thing he was criticised for by Real Madrid players towards the end was they could see what Barcelona were doing. They knew what they'd done with Spain, that they really practiced how to attack. And Mourinho's thing was always, you don't need to practice how to attack. That's all about improvisation. And I think that's something he's never really changed.
Yeah.
I also think, you think of when he was at Spurs, how often they would take a lead, even quite early in the game, and then try to sit on it as if he was trying to make a point of I will win games 1-0. And you're sort of like, it's Crystal Palace, just go and score the second and the third, and then the game's done. And I think when he was at Chelsea, he loved a 2-0 win. That was the thing he was great at. Go 1-0 up, reduce the risk factor a little, but still pose a threat, get the second, game done.
Yeah.
Whereas by the time he got to Spurs, obviously, I guess, he was working with poorer players at Spurs than he had at Chelsea. It was score the first goal, bed in, don't try and do anything. And I think that sort of paranoia overwhelmed him. And the point about age, I think, is interesting, that maybe Ancelotti is just a much more relaxed figure. Ancelotti, I think, has football in the right perspective. And maybe that's partly to do with having been a great player as well. He had less to prove than Mourinho.
Because I don't know how Mourinho would genuinely handle the Vinicius situation. And Ancelotti is like kind of just, Ancelotti knows what's going on. It's just sort of like, well, we'll see how it goes.
But it's just the way the two managers approach the game. Mourinho wouldn't pick him.
No.
When you think of games, the way he treated Joe Cole at Chelsea, for instance, Joe Cole was nowhere near as sort of relaxed in his attitude to defending as Vinicius. So Vinicius just wouldn't get away with that. He wouldn't be in the team.
As for Manchester United, a word on Ten Hag's current standing, do you think? Is he still like one bad night away, not least against Jose Mourinho's Fenerbahce, from full-on crisis again? Is there a little bit more coolant on the situation than that?
They did play very well second half against Brentford. You've got to caveat that by saying it's only Brentford. But, they won, and that's good, and they did play well in the second half, and Rashford looked good again. So we've seen flickers of form. Maybe that is going to burst into some sort of consistent flame.
Yeah. De Ligt was good. One of his signings. That's helpful.
Yeah. But if they lose to Fenerbahce, it's not an embarrassment. It's not humiliation. Well, depending on what the score is. But if they lose, by 1 or 2, that can happen away from home in Turkey. Fenerbahce not having the best season, but they're not a terrible side by any means. But it's the fact that it is Mourinho just adds that extra bit of spice. I don't think even if Fenerbahce win 5-0, the Ten Hag will be sacked before the weekend. But it's just sort of slowly the weight of opinion grows, and at some point there will be a tipping point. Where that is, I have no idea, because I think we've gone past quite a few places where you'd normally think the tipping point would be.
Yeah, that's tomorrow night, Thursday night. One last one before you go. I'm just curious where this Newcastle situation might go. So, as people know, and we touched on the podcast yesterday, if people were listening, in accordance with Premier League rules, there is to be no state involvement with the purchase, or there was to be no state involvement with the purchase of Newcastle. Initially, the Premier League had blocked the sale, and then there were, quote, legally binding assurances given that absolutely the state is not involved here. The PIF is an independent financial body, entity. And now, somehow, Amanda Staveley's WhatsApp messages have ended up with the Telegraph. And so the Crown Prince is all over them. As, at one point she's warning the sellers, quote, the Crown Prince is losing patience, not the PIF, the Crown Prince. And then when the deal was hitting trouble, she said the governor of the PIF was, quote, trying to convince the Crown Prince not to pull out. And on it goes in this vein. This is surprising to nobody. Obviously, everybody knew what was going on here. Is it now just though so nakedly apparent to everybody that, I don't know, there'll have to be some select committee here to say what's all this, or will this be swept away because we love the oil?
I actually don't think it changed the situation at all, because Mohammed bin Salman was always the chairman of the PIF. So of course the chairman has influence and sway. So if you think of say it was a British company and it's Malcolm Smith is the chairman, and you're saying, no, Malcolm's getting a bit annoyed by this, that wouldn't seem that Malcolm has sort of undue influence. You just think, well, of course the chairman has influence over the board. The point is that Mohammed bin Salman is the chairman of the PIF, therefore the PIF is a state entity, as indeed they argued in a US court when they were arguing exactly the opposite as what they've argued here.
Oh, when they didn't want to be witnesses for Liv, was it?
Exactly, yeah. That we can't release this information because it would impinge on our diplomatic rights or our sovereign rights. So it's always been blatantly obvious that this. How can a public investment fund of a state not be the state? I mean, I know that a lot of times in politics and business you sort of erect these paper walls which are sort of necessary fictions. But that's a pretty thin paper wall, and everybody always knew it was. So I don't really think it changes anything. It was a disgrace then. It's a disgrace now. It's always been a disgrace. But I don't think it's going to persuade Richard Masters to do anything. I guess the only thing, as and when the football bill comes through, which could be this week, whether that it leads to some questions relating to that, then
maybe. But it's too late, though.
Maybe.
Yeah. So you think?
Yeah, this is the problem that the wolves are in the sheepfold. That these are things that should have been sorted out 50 years ago. Maybe that's unrealistic that anybody could foresee this, but at some point in football's past, there was a need to say clubs are not normal businesses; they need to be protected. They are, I think, heritage assets is the phrase that UEFA likes to use. Yeah, and they should have been given a special status. And whether that included something like you have in Germany with 50+1 fan ownership, the fans always have to have the majority on the board, or the majority of ownership. It's something to keep them attached to their communities rather than being. And this is not particularly a point about Manchester City or Newcastle, though clearly it does refer to them. But any oligarch, any incredibly rich private equity fund, they could essentially bankrupt the Premier League. The body is meant to be governing it by bringing persistent legal action of questionable merit, and there's not much you can do about it. So that makes football ungovernable, and that is a huge problem.
Yeah, fair point. So yeah, okay. In that context, the word disgrace is probably pretty fair. Then you feel it is a disgrace.
I mean, yeah, because the regulation is very clear that you can't have state involvement. What else could the Saudi PIF be but state involvement?
No, you don't understand. You see, yeah. Okay. Thanks so much, Jonathan Wilson. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Thank you.
The brilliant Jonathan Wilson there. It is a disgrace. Disgrace is the word, I think. Just before we sign off for today, there's bits and bobs waiting for you in your feed. And as I mentioned at the top, you would have heard us promise Ruth Fahey, who now sadly is busy with her actual job. Cheek of that. So what's going on here is that Ireland are looking to qualify for the Euros next year. They were in that impossible group, you'll remember, with France and Sweden and England. That was never really going to be their route through. So their route through now is via the playoffs. Dave Kelly is over in Tbilisi for the paper. They're going to play Georgia on Friday and Georgia on Tuesday in Tallaght Stadium Tuesday and Tbilisi on Friday. It's a case of how much. They're going to beat the living snot out of Georgia. In the World Cup qualifier, they beat Georgia 11-0 at home and 9-0 away. That was just last year. Eileen Gleeson has said there is no complacency. Even if there was, I think they'd be just fine. So their real test is going to come in the next match, which will be the kind of the real playoff for the Euros. That will be either against Wales, most likely Wales, or Slovakia, who are 50th in the world. Wales are 31st, Ireland obviously a bit ahead of them. But Wales did, in very impressive fashion, beat Ireland 2-0 in a friendly earlier this year. So there isn't as much kind of hype or build-up about this game because it's a foregone conclusion. Ireland, you think Aston Villa, if they don't win the Champions League, will feel bad. The way I've set this up, they better beat Georgia. But so they'll hockey Georgia one way or another, and then it's kind of on to last week of November, first week of December is when that big game, presumably against Wales, is going to happen, though, that two-legged game. So that would be big. So at the moment, it's kind of still the dying embers of that war of words between Gleeson and Kilduff. That's kind of forming the main backdrop to the game. Again, Louise Quinn and Megan Connolly are injured. Courtney Brosnan is suspended. It's hard to get too worried about all that. It's a strange kind of build-up to what is like an eliminator type game.
How do you even build up as a player? I mean, it's a strange camp. Obviously, you just have the two of them, and you know you're going to win. I'd say if you're a manager, there is, even though you're definitely going to win, there's still a part of you thinking, Jesus, everybody knows, everybody thinks, everybody's expecting. What if this goes wrong? And if you're a player, are you just thinking it was 11 last time? Can we get more? Is that the mindset?
And it's not even a one-off game. It's like, imagine we drew like 1-1 with them. We'll just hockey them in Tallaght. So again, I don't think this is how elite sports people think, but it's how I'm thinking.
But are they thinking? Can we get more than 11?
I don't know. There's no value in that, obviously, because you're just winning a playoff game. There's no league on it, so there's not even an incentive. They're probably going to win 6 and then 8 on Tuesday.
Come on.
14. Yeah, Georgia not very good, so that's where we are. We will talk to Ruth Fahey, I would think maybe Tuesday, although that will date very quickly. So maybe Wednesday? Monday, going to be super busy. Monday's a bank holiday.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're not doing a bank holiday show. We're working to live, not living to work here, folks. So, but we've got a nice little interview for you on Monday, which will be in your feed. And then Tuesday, there's no point doing a Tuesday podcast for a 7:30 kickoff on Tuesday. It'd be a date. So we'll do something on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to
good to have that production meeting there.
Yeah. Some great content. Put that in the timestamp.
We're talking about chapters yesterday.
Yeah. So let's talk to Ruth Fahey on Wednesday about Ireland through to playoff, I think is the best way to do that.
Okay. So now when we finish this, should we stop recording, edit it, put it up on the feeds, stuff like that, maybe cut some bits up for
publish
social.
it. Yeah. Good.
And then we'll just suppose go again tomorrow then.
We've rugby tomorrow. So Rory O'Connor and Ian Madigan with us. Ireland squad has been announced. No, huge shock. Caelan Doris captain. So we'll talk to the boys about that tomorrow. Colin, thank you.
Thank you, Joe.